What's up, everybody? My name's Indy, and that gentleman next to me is our special guest today. That's Jay Powell from Powell Group Consulting, and welcome to IndieGameBusiness, sponsored by Powell Group Consulting. And today, our special guest is Jay Powell from Powell Group Consulting, and we haven't done something like this in forever. I don't think we've ever done an interview of you.
But Dan, I appreciate, it's an honor to be here, and I'm a big fan of the show. So I'm just looking forward to, providing whatever insights I can.
So how has the show helped you in your career? That's what I want to know.
What's that? All right, sorry.
How has the show helped you in your career?
How has it helped me?
Yeah.
I actually this is the weird part. I have actually had times at conferences where it's like I'm wearing the hoodie, or they just see me and people come up to me and they're like, hey, love the show, love what you do, blah, blah, blah. And that part is still a little like surreal to me, but I love it because it makes me feel like, on these dark days that we have in the industry where it's like, okay, nothing's going right, nothing's working. This is all just one big gigantic, cluster. It makes me go, oh, wait, we've actually done something that's helping people here. And there is a shiny light at the end of the tunnel. So that's other than getting me recognized here and there. That's
awesome. That's awesome. I mean, this has been what was
5 years?
5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Actually, this will be 6 because we started doing this in 2018 because the conferences started in 2019.
Mm-hmm. So, and we were just like, look, we're doing this before COVID.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's like,
wow. That is just.
So the weird part is there's all this stuff that I do on social media while the guest is usually doing that first question. And I can't do it because I'm the first question. And so I have like multiple screens up. But all right, let's go ahead.
Well, I got something to do. Okay, so we'll start where we always start. I like to say that because I wanted to say that because that's what you say. We'll start where we always start. How did you get into the industry, Jay?
I needed beer money. So I was in college, barely graduating along with my English literature degree, and I was a RA in the dorm. And for those of you who aren't in America, don't know what that is, that's the student who's in charge of the other students on their hall. So I was like the role model or enforcer or whatever. And this is great for your parents because that means you get free room and board. Not so much for you because you don't get paid. And I needed money, specifically generally beer money, given my college GPA. And I answered an ad in the school newspaper, and they said, we are looking for people to come in and evaluate games and tell us what you think. So it wasn't a tester position. It was literally like an evaluator position. And started doing that my junior year of college. And when the intern who was in charge of that program graduated college, the two owners put me in charge of the program. And then when I graduated, they offered me a job. And so I became an agent for developers straight out of college at like 21. And that's where it all started.
That was back when you had to load your video game from a cassette tape, right?
That wasn't that far back.
Commodore 64.
But we did have a ton of CDs, and we might have. Trying to think I don't think we were still on 3.5 discs back then. I think it was just CDs.
That's funny. Okay, so I'm going to put the first question in chat to bring it up. We have a bunch of questions. If you guys got questions, go ahead and post them into the chat on the live stream. If you post it on Discord, I might miss it because I'm paying attention to more things than I normally do. So come into one of the live streams and post in there, and that'd be greatly appreciated. So this is from Jawad. What's the story behind the creation of the Powell Group and IndieGameBusiness?
That's a good one. So the Powell Group started so I'll give you the speed version of my career. That company that I started at, I ended up being there 10 years. And so we were an agency through 7 or 8 years of that. It's like we did like the first deal for Starbreeze, and we did a lot of stuff from Paradox. I'm actually the one that did the first distribution deals for Europa Universalis and a lot of those titles in the US, and many other companies. And then we had a epiphany and said, well, let's just switch from being agents to being publishers. There's no reason we can't do this. And this was right when the whole, digital craze was starting anyway. And so we became a publisher, and I stayed there for another 3 years, I believe, and then left and started a company with two other friends of mine from that company. And we were basically a production studio. But back then there was no such thing no one knew what a production studio was. But what we would do is we would work with Disney and Cartoon Network and National Geographic and, all of these brands and IPs. And they would come to us and say, well, we have this kind of event coming up, or we want a game that is like this that we can release. And so we would handle the production and the design, and then we would contract a team somewhere in the world based on their experience to do the game. And we did that successfully. I mean, we weren't making tons of money, but we were at least in the positive for a couple of years. And then we decided to do our original games. And so the first time I went out and got a New York Times bestselling author, and we made a hidden object game based on her book. It did pretty well. I mean, it was not a failure in any way, shape, or form. I mean, we didn't become millionaires, but it did make money. And then we tried to go and do two truly original games without an IP on it, and they both failed. And so at that point, we're sitting around going, okay, now what? So I started looking for freelance business development work, and I was hired by a company that had a consulting firm that was based solely on optimizing free-to-play mobile game monetization. And after working with them for like 3 or 4 months, I was like, if there's a niche in this industry for this type of consultancy, well, there has to be a niche, an opportunity for me to just do biz dev as a consultant for a lot of companies. And so that's where the Powell Group started. And I called it the Powell Group because I wanted companies to think that we were bigger than we actually were, which was just me. And now we actually are a group. And then, it's grown from there. So that was back in 2010. So the Powell Group's been around for 14 years. IndieGameBusiness was born of about 20 years of frustration. It was the fact that, no one teaches developers how to do business. There are a small number of universities that have maybe a class that you take when you're getting a game design degree. And I think the final straw was I was giving a lecture at one of the many GDCs they used to do. So they would have the big one in San Francisco, but then they would have smaller ones around the country, around the world. And I was in LA giving one, and it was talking about, qualifying your publishers and making sure that you've got a good publisher for your project. And I said, okay, then you go and you qualify them, and I left it at that. It's like, you qualify your publisher, and I go to the next slide, and somebody raised their hand. I'm like, what do you mean? And to me, someone who had been doing this for, at that time, probably 10 years, I was like, what do you mean you don't know? And then I was like, oh my God, you don't know. I was like, we have reached the point, or I had reached that point where knowledge that I assumed everybody had, they didn't. That was just my own personal bias. Like, of course, everybody knows you go look and do research on your publisher. But then I was like, oh, wait, shit, nobody does know that. Or a lot of people don't know that. And so, like the good business person that I am, I started writing white papers, because that's what people do, right? Nobody reads white papers. I don't read white papers. And so, it came to one of those, it's like, well, I don't know how to teach people to do this. And we did one of our developer surveys. And one of the questions was, where do you prefer to learn? How do you prefer to consume knowledge, basically? And it was just so overwhelming to YouTube. And me being Gen X and not growing up with YouTube, I'm like, are you serious? And so I was like, I picked up the phone, and I had recently met Dan through a friend of ours at another conference. And I called him, and I'm like, I have this idea, and you might tell me it's stupid, but I don't know how to do it. And so I told him, I was like, I want to go, and instead of, applying for all these speaking things at conferences, why don't we just do those talks online on Twitch, and then maybe bring in other people to do it and make it available to everybody. I was like, that's my idea, and I can find the people, but I don't know the first thing about streaming. And Dan's like, well, I can handle streaming. And so that's how Indie Game Business started back in 2018. And then after we had done several of these shows, then we're like, okay, look, we know how to get it out there now. We know how to teach people, but we don't know, they still need a place to meet publishers, and they still need a place to meet lawyers and marketing firms and all these other things that you do when you go to a real conference. And so I was like, well, let's just do this online. And this was like 2019. This was pre-pandemic. And so I called Fedor over at Meet to Match and said, look, I have this again. It's like, I have this idea. I said, I want to use your system because, your platform is like the best that's out there. But instead of saying we're going to meet at table 14, I want to put like a Zoom link in it or something. And at first they told me that no, they don't want to do that because that was like away from their business model, which I respected. I didn't like because I wanted to work with them. And then luckily about a week and a half later, Fedor called me back and goes, okay, let's give this a shot. And so we did, and we had our first digital conference in 2019. And so we did 3 that year, and we've done 2 or 3 every year since. And it's just continued to grow. And somewhere along the line, Dan was like, you need a Discord server. I'm like, there's like 6 people watching us on Twitch. What do we need a Discord server for? And yeah, he was right. Now we have like almost 8,000 people on the Discord server. So that's the long story of how the Powell Group and Indie Game Business came to be.
That's good. That's good. That's like, I'm just like, as you're talking through it, I'm like remembering all of that. Wow, my beard was actually not white then.
Yes, neither of us. I think we were both. But it's so funny to go back and, if you can find those old, it's like the first shows that we did, like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Okay, so here's my question. What exactly does the Powell Group do?
I don't know. I just work here, dude. Which I have been told in meetings I cannot say because my name is on the company, which I think is completely unfair. The Powell Group over its years has evolved and grown. And so we do a variety of different things for different companies. So if you're a developer, we can help you find publishers. We can do miniature versions of our audits. So we'll actually play your demo, give you deep feedback on it, give you pitch deck feedback, even to the point of we'll go through and generate a list of publishers that you need to talk to. Keep in mind, the Powell Group stuff costs money. The Indie Game Business stuff is free for everybody. But if you need the Powell Group to do stuff, yes, we are a consultancy that tries to make money. And then so we can fund IGB. So we do that for developers. We do a variety of market research. We've got obviously access to a lot of, if you're a service provider, we have access to a lot of developers, so we can easily do market research for that. But then we also do it on the consumer level to test if you have an idea. So maybe we want to take our next game in this direction. What would the market think? And so we do that. On the publisher, if you're a publisher or you're an investor, we do scouting. We do very deep dive audits into your projects to make sure that the games are actually going to be fun. And so we can eat. So the games are going to be fun, that your marketing and publishing strategy is accurate, that the projects are actually on schedule, that they're going to, the team has a production pipeline in place that's going to get it out. And then if you're a service provider, we do a lot of that same market research. We do a lot of coaching on how to make your products stand out when developers and publishers are being pitched 24 different service providers every single week. So it sounds like a lot, and on paper it is, but in reality it's not for us because we've been doing this for so long. It's about bringing in the best partners, the best projects, the best tools to get games to market and for everybody to actually make money so we can keep doing this. So basically biz dev, licensing, and production consulting.
Okay, so there was a question from Discord from earlier that goes right along with this. It didn't pop up. How can Powell Group help us indies connect with publishers? From my understanding, Powell Group has publishers find and evaluate games that might be fitting. So what's the process look like? A dev comes to you and says, hey, we want to find a publisher.
So this is funny because this is what we basically did pure agency work for the first several years. And then when the scouting took off, I had developers still coming to me going, can you help us find a publisher? And I'm like, I can't. And it didn't have anything to do with like legal responsibilities or non-competes or anything like that. It was simply the fact that we were scouting and for so many publishers and investors that we didn't have the bandwidth internally. So we partnered up with Representing Games, which is a division of Meet to Match, with Klaus and Emmanuel over there. And so now we do that again. So we've got several developers that we represent in conjunction with Representing Games. The process is very simple. I know Pebs is out there. We've got a link where you can submit your game. And then we go through it and we look at it just like a publisher would. We have a green light meeting every single week where we go through the submissions and what was stood out and what didn't and that sort of stuff. And if it's something that we feel we can add value on, we're not somebody that's just going to go, oh, okay, you're going to cut us a deal and give us 10%. Yeah, sure, we'll represent your game. That's not it. It's a matter of we understand what's hot out there right now, what publishers want, what they're looking for. And if we look at a project and we're like, we're just, we can send this out, but we're going to have a hard time finding a partner for it. It's like, I don't want to waste your time or my time. We'll just tell you that. But if it is something that we can do, then we work together with Representing Games and we send you a contract. It's, it's all commission based. You don't owe us any money up front. And then we go from there. And if it's not a fit, and we do have to send you one of those emails, it's like, look, it's just not a fit right now, but you still want help on the consulting side, we will absolutely sit down with you and help you build your pitch deck and model your, get your demo ready. And we'll give you the list of publishers to go to. The difference is we're not the ones actually going after the publishers at that point. You're going to be doing it, but you're going to be doing it with all the tools and materials that we've helped you prepare.
And if you want to go about it all totally on your own, you can scour through the hundreds of indie game business videos. Like I was talking to the developer the other day. They're like, I've got this game. What do I do? And I looked at it and I'm like, well, here, check out these things. Check out these videos about how to make your Steam page better. Check out Chris Dukowski, how to market a game. He's got some free resources. Check out this, here's subscribe to the newsletter for the Powell Group to get the free publisher list. There's things that you can do that don't cost money. But if you pay for it,
work though.
Yeah, it costs work. It costs time. But if you pay for it, it's going to be done by somebody by people that have done it repeatedly and know people, right? That's the good thing about
that's
working.
The perk.
Yeah, if you work with a publisher, for example, like if you've never published a game, you're just learning all of that stuff. But if you work with a publisher, you're working with someone that's done that to hundreds of games, maybe thousands of games. So they know the process, they know what to do, they know all of that stuff. You can't do it by yourself, but it's a long road. Okay, so there's another question from James Coote on Discord that goes right along with the publisher stuff. Publisher landscape is constantly evolving. What trends, aside from the current finance drought, are you seeing amongst publishers?
One, there's not a finance drought. That's one misconception. There are funding ranges that are more difficult than others right now. If you need less than $1 million funding, it's actually easier than if you need 1 to 5 or 10 million in funding. And if you need more than 10 million in funding, it's easier than that 1 to 5. The very difficult space right now is if you've got a project that needs somewhere between $1 and $10 million funding. That space is very, very, very tight. Below that and above that, it's basically like it's always been. There's plenty of people out there. The problem and the reason you see so many people talking about this drought is the fact that there's so many games out there being pitched right now. I mean, so we've got an internal database that we started, when we started doing scouting for the Powell Group. So that was 2-3 years ago. There's thousands of games in it, games that our fantastic scouting team has found on their own and games that were submitted to us. So it's less of a drought. There are plenty of publishers spending plenty of money. It's a matter of the fact that there's so many other developers fighting you for that money that you absolutely have to be, dead on right out of the gate. You can't afford to send, a publisher some half-ass package or something that you're not answering all the questions that they want asked, because that's going to be an easy kick and an easy no from them. But there is funding out there. There's not the giant drought that everybody's talking about. But yes, some areas are harder to get funding in than others. The other trends I'm seeing, there's a much bigger divide now between premium publishers and free-to-play publishers. It's almost like two different worlds completely. And there's a good amount of, what's the word I'm looking for? Focus. So if you look right now at a lot of the publishers that are doing well, it's the ones that kind of focus in on one niche. I mean, Hooded Horse is a good example. Paradox is a good example. Even someone like Devolver, they don't necessarily focus on a niche, but they focus on a particular style. So the publishers that are having more difficulty right now are the ones that are just like picking up all kinds of random stuff, and there's not a huge focus. But yeah, that's the two big things I would say.
That's good stuff. From Battle Charge on Discord, do you have any set criteria on how to choose on how to choose a game for publishing? Personal favorites, do's and don'ts, and what ticks you off?
Oh God, what ticks me off? What ticks me off, honestly, and this has happened recently, is when you see some developers go under that you talked to a year or 2 years ago and tried to help. And they didn't want an agent. They didn't want help. They were going to do it all on their own. And then they go out of business. And it's like it doesn't tick me off because I missed out on money or anything like that. It ticks me off because they probably had, if we were interested in helping them, they had a really good game. They had a game that we could, get to market and could sell and could do well. And for whatever reason, they didn't want the help. That's what ticks me off more than anything else. When it comes to criteria for choosing a game to publish, my personal favorites don't come into account. The company that I worked with years ago, one of the owners was all about, okay, we're going to do everything. We got forms and we've got committee and it's going to be a joint decision. But then when some game came in that he liked, it was like, oh, okay, we're going to do this one, despite the fact that, all the evaluators were like, oh, this shit's not going to sell. That's, one of the things that I stay far away from. I've had games that I've submitted into our greenlight process that I was really excited about. Had one this week, actually. And the team came back and, the reaction was, no, it's not there. It's not ready. It's just a little bland, and I was like, well, shit. So I'm not that boss that's going to like force feed the things that I like into, our systems. When it comes to choosing a game, it's a matter of getting a variety of feedback from a variety of different people and looking at it analytically. There's still a gut aspect to scouting and to finding games to publish. That part is why I'm never worried about AI taking the job of a good game scout, because it's not just analytics. If it was just analytics, anybody could do it, but it's not. There is a gut aspect in there. So it's, the most basic stuff is you need a playable, you need a pitch deck, and you need to be able to answer all those core questions that the publisher or the investor is going to have for you. You need to be able to answer those coherently and with authority. In terms of do's and don'ts, don't go in and pitch, here's 3 different versions of our game that we can do. Pick the one you want to make. Pitch that one. If the budget needs to be lowered because of the publisher, they'll tell you that. But don't go in and say, well, this is the game that we can do for 500 grand, and here's the game that we can do for $1 million. And if you give us 2 million, this is what we'll do. Pitch the 2 million one. Well, right now, pitch the 1 million one. But generally, pitch the one that you want to make. But yeah, that's it. I mean, you just have to make a good game. and be able to show early on why your game is good and why it's different than everything else out there. Don't bring me Vampire Survivors 2 that looks exactly like Vampire Survivors 1 and adds nothing to it.
People used to ask me, how do you be successful as a streamer? And I was like, be entertaining. Be entertaining. Well, how do you do
don't
that?
Look at the viewer numbers. That's the first thing Dan
look at
told
the
me.
viewer numbers. Yeah, that was do not look at the viewer numbers. Also, like things with games, like it can look beautiful and it can sound amazing, but how does it feel? AI, I don't think is ever going to be able to be like, this game is good because it feels a certain way. Right?
Can AI make a
just,
game?
Just can't do it.
But can it make a good one? No.
Right? I mean, I've seen some beautiful games that just are not fun to play.
Yeah. What's up?
Oh, okay, here we go. From James, from Discord. James Coote. What's one thing you see indie devs and studios that are doing right now that maybe they weren't 2 to 5 years ago?
I'm so happy to say this. Thinking about marketing. Even if they're not marketing, even at least, I mean, just the fact that it's being considered and thought about at an early stage is a step up from, where we've been over the last couple of years. It's, I think as things get tougher in the industry and there is so much more competition, developers are having to think earlier on about the business case for their game. And I know people don't like to blend that. It's like, well, this is a game. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be entertaining. Yes, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what it absolutely should be. But you also need to be able to make a business case for it. I tell folks all the time, if you're making games as an art form or just as a hobby, you don't have to listen to me. But if you want to make this a career so you can stop doing other stuff and just focus on making games, there has to be a business case for it. You have to be able to actually market it and sell it. And thankfully, we're seeing more studios think that way now than 5 years, far so more than 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah, the common thing is like, as much money as you're going to spend on production, that's how much money you need for marketing.
A lot of times, yeah.
That's so here we go. Here's a good one. Considering all the layoffs, Dinomaniac, and we go through seasons of layoffs for sure. Where do you see the future of the indie market? What are the chances that with all the developers that have been let go, the quantity, perhaps not so much quality, of the games will overflood the market? Where do we go from there? I mean, how many games were released on Steam last year? 20-something thousand?
That I've seen. I used to have a deck that like kept that tally, and it just keeps getting worse every single year. So one, I don't think we can overflood the market anymore. I think it's already been overflooded. There's, it doesn't matter if there's 3 feet of water in your house or 8 feet of water in your house is still flooded. There's still, no way around that. There already are, and there's going to be more repercussions with all these, layoffs on the developer side and the publisher side. We're going to see people leave the industry, which is not bad. This industry is not for everybody. I don't even encourage people to go into this industry. I will actively, if you're a student, I will actively try to talk you out of it because this industry is absolutely brutal. But if you love it and you're twisted like the rest of us that are in this, then you'll be fine.
Suffer.
But the people that don't want to be here will leave, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is not for everybody. But we're going to see more indie studios pop up, which is going to drive more competition, for those publishing dollars. But I think one of the things that I want to see come out of it is less indie developers trying to make $15, $20, $25 million games and trying to make $500,000, $1 million games that can actually make money. And that's very, very doable. I mean, that's, the bottom line is if you have a game that costs $750,000, you need to make less money for it to be profitable than if your game costs $10-15 million. I say welcome to hell to new developers, and then they cry after 6 months. It's like, yes, that's the way this is. But there's going to be more and more good indie games that are coming out because these teams, just through natural selection, basically, are going to be built by people who have had experience in the industry, and they know the things that have to be done to get it to market and all the other little factors that you have to figure into everything. So I think we're going to see, some people are going to call it an indie apocalypse like they did, 7 or 8 years ago. I call it a renaissance. Yeah, look, the industry is always going to be full of bad games. Steam's always going to be full of bad games, but the higher level of good games that are going to come out is what I'm actually looking forward to in about 12 or 18 months.
Yes, the competition makes it better. So what are your thoughts on the well, I'm sure you read it about Microsoft trying to acquire Valve for $16 billion.
One, that ain't enough to buy Valve. I don't think, I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. At some point, somebody's going to buy Valve. Gabe Newell is not going to run Valve until he falls over dead. The man's already got like 2 or 3 submarines and he lives in New Zealand. How much more money do you possibly need? I don't think that the number I saw was like less than they paid for Activision, however long ago that they bought it. And there's just no way Valve is going to go that cheap.
Simply because of Steam.
I think part of the reason they haven't been bought is because it'd be too expensive to buy them.
Yeah, simply because of Steam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do you think will happen? What would be your prediction if Microsoft did buy Valve and started running Steam?
I don't even want to know. It's like we saw what happened when they started running Skype and they started running LinkedIn. So part of me is a bit terrified at that prospect. But at the same time, even today, the Microsoft Game Store is not a platform to be ignored. I know a lot of people who would say if they're looking at stores to put their game on, they're going to put it on Microsoft Store before they even put it on Amazon, which says something about Amazon, but that's beside the point. I think that there's obviously somebody's going to eventually do it. I don't want to think about what would happen if it comes under Microsoft's control and they let it. But who knows? It could be good. Look at all the things that we complain about Steam. The lack of discoverability, the lack of transparency in what they're going to do and when they're going to do it and all that. There is room to improve Steam. Is Microsoft the one to do it? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, that leads into, I'm going to get to that question that was just asked, but that leads into another question from Discord. If there was one change that Steam or the other first-party platform digital storefronts could make that would help you or your clients, what would it be? Or conversely, what are the biggest roadblocks these platforms have created for you and your clients?
All right, I'm going to say something that's going to be extremely unpopular and will probably get me in some trouble. I think there needs to be a bigger barrier on Steam. I think there needs to be a bigger criteria to release a game on Steam than, you have $500 and you can make a Steam account. That's not going to affect good developers, but that's going to clear out a lot of, the crap that gets thrown on Steam. I think there does need to be a better curation.
Maybe be some kind of process, maybe where people could green light it.
Well, the problem is when they did that, that sucked too.
Yeah, it did.
So, it was like impossible for a lot of indie devs to get through the green light process. But then on the flip side, if you did get through the green light process, then your stuff never had to be greenlit again. You could release anything. So we saw companies get one game of mediocre to good quality through the process and then release 24 shit games, after that happened. I think there does need to be a bigger barrier of entry. I was probably one of the people that was maybe it's not even $500. Maybe it's $100. I don't know what it is, but I think it needs to be higher. And I think that there needs to be some sort of, like a farm system in baseball. I don't know what the analogy would be other than that. So for our non-American, non-sports friends out there, you've got all the Major League Baseball teams, and this is where my ADD is like going to kick us off into an extreme tangent. You've got all the major baseball teams, but each one of those major league teams owns 2 or 3 smaller teams around the country. And so when they draft a player, if that player is not, ready for the big leagues, they go play on these smaller teams until they get better. And I would like to see more developers using itch as a testing facility and as a, here's my game, it's early stage, or here's my game, it's the first one I've done. I need to work on the mechanics. I need to work on the art. I need to work on whatever, and use that as a learning and, tool to get to the point where then they can release something on Steam that's going to be successful. That's like, to me, I mean, it's not necessarily going to help me. It's not necessarily always going to help our clients, and the fact that, if there's less stuff on Steam, you got better chance of, visibility. And do I think this is ever going to happen? No, I don't. But I would like to see the bar raised for the minimum to get on Steam, just to basically let some developers know, okay, look, you need to put this back in the oven for a little while. It's not quite done. But also to keep at least some of the trash out of there.
You know what I really miss? Dazura.
The what?
Dazura. Remember, it was like Steam, but it was platform.
Yeah.
I love that. And then they went through some financial. It was bought by a company.
I remember
they didn't like, the first company didn't pay their taxes, and so they owed a bunch of money in taxes, and then it had to close. But Dazura still exists, but now it's just free online games. It's not anything like it was. Man, I love Dazura. Dazura is one of my favorites. All right, here we go. This is from chat right here. Yuri. I'm from Brazil. I'm in Brazil, and our currency has less value than the dollar. Does publishers see this as a good opportunity for stronger investment, or being outside the U.S. present more difficulties than advantages?
I've been doing business in the game industry in Brazil for 25 years. That was like one of the test markets that they gave me when I started. They're like, okay, one of your territories is you're going to sell games into Brazil. The currency it's a good thing and a bad thing. The problem I have with the perception of Brazil and the rest of South America as well is that so many companies look at it as an art resource, and that's it. And there are fantastic artists. There are studios in South America who have been churning out artwork and animation for TV and movies for years, and they do a lot of that in games too. But there hasn't been a lot of, as many hits come out of South America as you have seen in Europe and the US or North America and a lot of Asia. It works in your favor in the fact that your services cost less. It works out of your favor in the fact that it's harder for you to get a lot of the support or the tools that you need to make games better. And it doesn't get as much publicity as other regions in the world. That's starting to change. I mean, Gamescom doing a Latin America show, or an officially Latin American show, which was used to be big, that's fantastic. And we're starting to see more eyes turn that way. But, the currency in Brazil is the same as a lot of other places around the world. You've got an advantage when you're going in and pitching contract work, or even when you're pitching projects. Your level, the quality of level that your game is at could be equal to one in North America, and you're going to be half the cost. That's a bonus. The lack of tool systems and internal pipelines and institutionalized knowledge that exist because, that whole region of the world has been overlooked for years is one of the things that is going against you right now. But quite frankly, it's one of the reasons we started Indie Game Business. It's like, I know teams from Brazil, Colombia, Chile can't afford to fly up to GDC and drop 10 grand to stay in San Francisco for a week. That's why we did this. But it's got pros and cons. It goes both ways. The thing is, keep going out there and talking to publishers, but you probably want to put in there, for those publishers that don't read the fine print, you are in Brazil. So when you pitch this game and it's fantastic and they can't figure out why it costs a third of what it cost another studio to do it somewhere else in the world, you go, hey, look, we're in Brazil. Shit's a little cheaper here. And they're like, oh, okay. That's what, and a lot of areas in the world have the same problem when it comes to, getting their dev kits. I don't know if Brazil's on the Microsoft or Sony's good list yet, but there's a lot of places in the world, especially in Southeast Asia and South America, where you literally cannot get a dev kit because Sony and Microsoft won't send it to you in that country. So pros and cons.
Pros and cons. Okay, here's a good talking about money. This is from Sparkling, which I believe is your name pronounced Lorene or Lauren? I don't know. From Tiny Zoo. What is your best advice for game developers or any business really to infuse money into their company consistently?
Never take your foot off the gas. That doesn't mean never take like a vacation, but you can't ever stop looking for new opportunities. And this is the biggest thing, when we get hired on the consulting side and, we're working on a retainer, we're doing biz dev for somebody. And they're like, okay, we've got enough work right now. We're going to stop and polish your contract. I'm like, okay, but what's going to happen is you're going to get down to the end of your, pipeline or into your cash flow or near your end. You're going to go, okay, let's start biz dev up again. And it doesn't work that way. You have to consistently be going out there and, talking to folks. It's like, our internal rule is we try to touch base with every publisher and investor at least once every quarter. So we always know, one, they know we're still here if they need something, but two, we always have fairly up-to-date understanding of what they're looking for and what they're doing. If you're running, say you're doing a contract development work, and you get a big contract and that's supposed to last you for, 12 months, 18 months. One, you don't know that it actually will. That's the problem with contract work. If the publisher decides to kill it or cut the funding or send it somewhere else, you have no recourse. You don't own any of that. You can't turn around and resell it to another publisher. So you have to, if you want consistent revenue coming in, you have to always be going out there pitching and talking to people and making sure that you're seen and trying to get new business. It's much easier to look at somebody and say, I would love to help you with this, but we're full for the next 6 months. We can either start on it 7 months from now, or I can refer you to another studio that we know that we work with. It's much easier to say that to somebody than it is to go, okay, we're going to have to do layoffs because we don't have any work coming in.
Yeah. Here's a comment that happened to me. Contract was over, and overnight the studio vanished. That is the nature of the beast in the video game industry.
A lot.
The video game industry, for me, anyways, because I do this, but also other contracts as well. And it's like I've always been open to looking for what's next. There's always something. What's next? My first, Lorene. Good. Lorene. All right. Wow. I have a question for Jay. Who is his favorite, me or Dan? Ask it.
You both have wonderfully redeeming qualities that I appreciate.
Wow. I'm the oldest. Cop out answer. I've been around longer. How's that?
Yeah, Dan has been around longer. He's seen a lot of drama.
I put up with more crap than you ever will. No. But you're the cooler one. I don't know, man. I got AC and a fan on right here.
Well, you live in Florida, and that's one of the things we file against you in the list of pros and cons.
Hey, I live. It's basically Alabama, right? All right. So if anybody has questions, go ahead and drop them in there. I mean, I've got a list of questions. I've got questions that Margarita and Ash gave me, and we haven't even gotten.
Let's jump into the ones from her class. So Margarita on our team, does biz dev. She does some associate producer work. She is our official South American correspondent down in Santiago, but she teaches a class once a week too. And so there were questions that came in from her students.
Okay, here we go. Number one. What are the challenges in the game industry on the business side?
Hold on. I actually cheated and I made this. I've already worked on her questions. So visibility and standing out. You have to be careful. You're not part of that trash on Steam that nobody looks at. You have to constantly be trying to get out there, be seen, because there's so much other stuff out there. The size of the industry and how much work it takes to reach everyone. So our publisher list is, well, now it's like 1,400 companies between publishers and investors, but roughly 600 of those are publishers. And the sheer amount of work it takes to go out and pitch your game, you're never going to pitch it to all 600. You shouldn't. There's no absolutely zero reason why you should do that. But even, a PC game can easily go to 150 companies. And so the sheer amount of work that it takes to do that is a lot of times just overlooked. I'll talk to developers and they're like, well, we pitched it to everybody. And I'm like, well, how much is everybody? And they're like, well, 15 or 20 publishers. And I'm like, that's not everybody. There's a question on our submission form. It's like, who have you already pitched this to? We've had developers that have come in and said, well, here's 50 companies I pitched it to. There's still opportunity in that. So a lot of times people don't realize just how much work it's going to be to go out and do the outreach, the follow-up, the questions, the calls, all that sort of stuff. And then, just understanding the evolving world of deal structures. We see developers come and ask us all the time, like, what's a good publishing deal look like? One, that's a highly dependent thing. And somebody in Discord challenged me to not say it depends all day to day. And I'm working on that. So there's a lot of different options and deals out there. So you can't really say what's a good deal. A good deal is the one that makes you money, makes the publisher money, and the game's successful. But we also get a lot of publishers that come to us and say, what's a deal looking like right now? Because they only see, what they're looking at, the games that are coming in, and basically how they've done things for years in the past. They don't see how everybody else is doing things, and we do. So those three things mainly.
All right, there's a comment right here. If they pitched it 50 times, it's also likely they did it in a poor way.
Well, yes, but it's also the fact that if you never follow up and you never get an answer from 30 of those 50, you don't know if it actually got seen or not. And so you can say, I sent it to all these companies and I never heard anything from it. And it's very possible that somebody did look at it and they were just lazy and never followed up and never told them, no, it's not a fit for us. But at the same time, it could have very well never even got to the desk that it needed to get to, or into the pipeline it needed to get into in order to be seen. So there's a lot of different reasons why they may not have got a deal out of 50, pitches. But there's tons of reasons for it.
And you can learn all the answers by watching Indie Game Business. Okay. Why an agent or agency and not other services?
And so I asked for a clarification on what other services meant. And Margarita said they were talking about publishers. So why you go to an agency, it's one, we look at things and we evaluate. It's almost like a pre-publishing run. So it's like, we know what publishers are looking for. So we look for the very same stuff. So you're going to get help with your pitch process, the deck, your demo, all of that sort of stuff. It's going to be in a more polished state than if you just send it on your own. Usually, now there are developers that can do this without agents. I'm not saying everybody, but you're going to go to the top of that publisher list. So if that publisher is looking at 50 games that week and they get one from us or one from another agency, those are typically going to get bumped up in the list because they know that the game's already been vetted by somebody. Somebody else has looked at this and goes, it does not suck. We're sending this to you for a reason. At least the good agencies do that. You're going to get more reach. You're going to get in front of people. You're going to get better market knowledge because those agents see a wide variety of deals around the industry. And it lets you focus on your game. Most developers don't have a dedicated business person. So the person who's doing the publisher outreach and the follow-ups and the phone calls and the meetings is also the same person who's doing the programming. And so if you're spending all of this time doing the business stuff, you're not spending time actually working on your game. And that's a huge, huge loss.
Yes. Yeah, because that becomes many, 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 many hours Here we go. This is from Lorene. Do you ever consider games by teams that have never pitched to any publishers?
Every day. I don't care that you've never pitched to a publisher. I care that you have a good game. It doesn't matter. And this is okay. So hold on. I'm going to go on a minor rant here. This gets me on one of my things, going back to this grinds my gears. What ticks me off? What ticks me off is when I meet with a developer, and this happens frequently. And they show me their game and they show me the budget, and they're like showing me this wonderful looking game. And then they're like, and our budget's $250,000. And I'm looking at them going, there's no fucking way you can make that game for $250,000. Why? How did you get this number? And they're like, well, somebody told us it was our first game and that's all a publisher would pay. Somebody lied, or they're just flat out ignorant. That's not true. That there is not an ounce of truth in that. That is a myth or something perpetuated by people who want shitty games cheaper, because that's what happens. If you have a $1 million game and then you go in and say, look, I'm going to do it for $250,000. What's going to happen is you're going to get a quarter of the way through development, and then you're going to need more money. And the publisher is either going to chunk more money into it, or which is going to put the pressure higher on you, or they're going to cancel it altogether. There's absolutely no maximum number a publisher is going to pay for your game just because you're new. Now, to be realistic, if you come in with a team that's never done anything and you hand me a $60 million game, okay, your chances are very low of that happening, but they're not zero. But, looking at games from teams that have never met, that's part of our job. That's part of what we do on the consulting side with a lot of these production audits, is we come in and we look at these teams and find where they're missing people, missing steps, missing things. But you should never hamstring the budget of your game because you're new. And yes, I want to find games from teams that have never done anything before, because one, we can help them more, but two, that means probably a bunch of other people haven't seen it either, and we can get something good. But yeah, and that's my rant on there is no maximum somebody's going to pay for your game just because you're new.
But the odds of that, like it being $1 million game and a publisher only going, oh, 250, right? The publisher's going to look at that and know that this is.
You would be surprised.
Would I be?
Yes.
Well, maybe the publishers need to hire Powell Group to.
Some of them have
to figure out their.
But no, I mean seriously, you would honestly be surprised at they look at it and they think it's a good deal, or the publisher doesn't do the due diligence on the team to understand why it costs this money. I mean, it does happen quite frequently. And then, the developer turns around and they're like, well, we need another, $4 million or whatever. And the publisher's like, what? No, why? Where is this coming from? Go, we're canceling the whole thing, so yeah, it does happen.
$250,000 down the drain. Ouch. How hard is it to make a team dedicated to business in comparison to a team dedicated to development?
I mean, it's not impossible. I mean, I managed to do it. So that means the average person has a pretty good chance. But it's a lot like building a development team. You still have to have people who are specialized in certain stuff. We have a wonderful scout who started out doing just some part-time scouting, and now she has like a team around her that does it. Jennifer, who has been with me, who I have known and worked with like 20 years off and on, but she's been with the Powell Group for 10 years, is effectively my right hand, and she handles all the outreach to the publishers and the investors, and does things like not let me play around with the CRM because I have been known to break it from time to time, and I get in trouble for that. Pebs started as the community manager just for basically our Discord. Now she's lead on marketing and sales for the Powell Group and IndieGameBusiness. It's a matter of, getting a team together and building it just like you would build, a development team. We got Heather, who is absolutely 100% world-class, literally wrote the book on production, led the Fortnite team for 3.5 years, just helped launch Helldivers 2. She's done indie games, all that sort of stuff. We just brought on Charlie, who was, doing partnerships and stuff for Global Game Jam, she's helping us get stuff for Indie Game Business. You're still building a team. You still have to have all of these different aspects that are in there. Everyone's got their focus. And so it's not very different, actually. God, did I forget anybody? Please tell me I didn't forget anybody. Margarita. Yes. I'm gonna blame because I already talked about Margarita earlier, but yeah, Margarita too.
Danielle.
I wasn't going to name her. Sometimes she doesn't want her name out there. Mm-hmm.
Good job. We can delete that. Wow. What is the percentage of revenue that a team can expect a publisher to take, and how?
So you're just trying to get me to say it depends at this point in time,
right? I think, Lorene, you just need to have a call with Jay.
No, I mean, but this is this is not an uncommon question. It really is. It's one of those that different publishers are going to have different ways of doing things. The way I look at it, and the way I think it should be done, is you look at the total amount of time and money that you put into your game, and then the total amount of money that the publisher is going to be putting into their game with marketing and everything else, and you start that as the split. I see everything from 15% going back to the publisher. I mean, there are still publishers who are going to do deals that say you don't get any money until after we get all of our money back, but those are fairly rare at this point in time. Most publishers are going to be paying something back to the developer day one. They do this to stay competitive, and because if they don't, a lot of developers won't work with them, but they also do it because they know that they have to keep you in business after the game launches. So there's going to be things like post-launch content and bug support and all that sort of thing. It can be anywhere from, 50% to 15%. And I have actually done deals in the past where the developer got 80% day one. It comes down to who's doing what and how much money everybody's put in. And that's why, as a developer, you constantly need to keep updates on this is how much time we spent on this. Because even if you're not paying yourself a salary, that time needs to be accounted for as if you were. That way you go to the publisher, and in your pitch deck, it doesn't say we need $1 million. It says we need $1 million, but we've already invested $1 million into this as well. And so you set that groundwork day one on where the deal is going to fall in. But there's not a standard. And that whole paying the publisher back process, you don't actually have to pay them back. They're taking that money out of the money that's coming from Steam or Microsoft or Nintendo or whoever.
Excellent. Let's see here. Yeah, not trying to get you to say depends. Just asking questions for the interview. I do want to get to some Ash questions. Ash had some really good questions.
Hold on, here's what I'm going to answer in the meantime.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I marked. Do you have recommendations for building a team before seeking funding?
Before you seek funding, you need to have your leads in place. So if you've got 20 people working at your studio, the publisher doesn't necessarily care who all 20 of them are. They want to know who's your lead engineer, lead artist, lead designer, lead producer, lead audio. Whatever the major pillars of your studio are, they want to know who those leads are. That's the part you need to have in place before you go to a publisher. Now, a lot of times people are pitching games and they don't necessarily have people on staff, but they know who they are. That's perfectly fine. Is it going to, diminish your chances versus a very similar game that already has a team in place? Yes, but it's not impossible. You can absolutely go into a publisher and say, this is who we have working on the game right now. Once we get funding, here are the other 5 or 3 or 2 or however many other leads that we're going to bring in. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly acceptable. It's done every single day.
There we go. So I've been working volunteers for 20 years. That time counts as unpaid salary, sort of?
Should have.
Yeah.
There's a value to it. Yeah. If you haven't been paid, what would somebody in your position have been paid for that? And if you're making a game, then yeah, that goes to that. Yep.
Yeah, because you've been doing that a long, long, long time. All right, let's get to some good nitty gritty questions right here. Oh, here we go.
I want the ice cream question.
No. Over the years, I guess I should put this up on screen. I'm just so excited about it. Over the years, what are some of the most obnoxious fads you have watched not games, but the industry go through? I mean, you could talk about obnoxious things in games, but I want to know about obnoxious people.
I'm not going to go into obnoxious people. I mean, we're not going to, I don't be naming names in that aspect of it. The good news is this industry is fairly self-regulating, at least at the indie side. People that are, assholes tend to get run out, or sometimes they get moved into a bureaucracy in a bigger company somewhere. But the most obnoxious fads, the ones that come to mind are a lot of the peripheral companies that are making things that no one wants. I've seen haptic feedback mice before for your computer. I've seen systems that you plug in and they shoot things into the air so you can smell what the environment is. There was one I saw on Hip Hop Gamer's Instagram. There was one he was playing with. It's like a new version of that. And I'm like, dude, I play a lot of zombie games. I don't want to smell that shit. The one that to this day I still laugh at is the Amazon Fire phone, because I was in a meeting at GDC at one of the hotels in a suite with the Amazon people. And this was before the Fire phone came out. And I'm looking at him going, why is somebody going to buy that phone versus buying an iPhone or one of the ones that's already out there on the market and doing perfectly fine? And this guy looks at me dead serious and picks up his phone. And he's like, because if you tilt it, you can see more of the battlefield. And I'm like, are you fucking serious? That's your selling point? The number of games that are going to build that in there. Plus, why is that a big deal at all? You can just scroll your screen or do something else. But they seriously looked at me dead in the eye and told me that the reason people were going to buy this phone versus any other phone for gaming is because if you tilted it, the camera would turn and you could see more. And I was like, no, that's not. And sure enough, it didn't work. But it's usually like the most random stuff that gets me. Anything where I can smell the game that I'm playing, I don't want to touch.
I guess it depends on what game you're playing.
I don't care. I don't want to smell it.
Okay, here's another good one from Ash. If you could have worked on any game, what would it have been?
I don't remember the majority of the games I did work on. Somebody found my Moby Games profile the other day, and there's like 6 games listed on it. That's like a drop in the bucket of that I've been involved. That is like some of the games that I have actually been credited on. I don't know. And here's the other thing. One of Margarita's students asked this about, what it's like testing games and playing games that aren't done. And I'm like, it's miserable. I know there are people that like it, but in my career, if I've been working on a game, I've usually been working on it for 6 to 12 months, sometimes even longer than that. By the time it hits store shelves, I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it. I don't want to play it. I've already played it enough. And a lot of the same stuff comes into, QA and evaluation. People are like, oh my God, all you do is sit around and play games all day. I'm like, well, one, no, we don't. There's also a lot of like reporting that goes into it, and there's other aspects of it. But 2, take the buggiest game that you've ever played and then make it worse and put placeholder stuff in there. It's like you have to have a certain mindset going into it. It's not always fun. Even if the game is fun, the process is not always fun because you're looking at things that are unfinished. You're dealing with bugs that, yes, they'll be fixed eventually, but they're not fixed in the build that you're in right now. So it's not all glamorous like it sounds to some people. I'll do a talk at like my son's school, and they're like, oh man, I want to work on Madden. I want to be a tester for Madden. And I'm like, okay, wait, time out. You're picturing just going in and playing this game however you want to for 8 hours a day. That's not what it is. You have to picture going in there and running the same play over and over and over and over and over for 8 hours, trying to find every little thing that, could be done. I was like, as an analogy, walk over to that wall, slam your face into it for 6 hours, and then come away and write a report about how it felt. That's what testing is like a lot of times. So I don't know.
Run into every corner of the map.
Yes. And then jump in place 3 times and, do it 360. I don't know that there's one that I would ever work on, that I ever wanted to work on, as much as I play so many different games anyway. I had a guy come through today, the guy that was doing our pest control, and he's like, "What's your favorite game?" And I was like, I couldn't. It's like, hell, I'm playing 8 games right now. It's like, I couldn't pick a favorite at this point if I wanted to.
My first credit on a game is from 2000. Ooh. I was a QA tester on a game called Catechumen by Enlightening. It was a first-person shooter, but instead of shooting people, it was a Christian game, and you shot Roman soldiers, and then they went on their knees, and it was like, oh. But I was a QA tester for that. I'm in Moby Games. And I just thought that was funny because
shot Roman soldiers
with a sword. You had a sword that kind of shot out, choo choo choo, right? They're like, hey, and then they would come after you. Man. All right, so here's something from Lorraine. This is pretty big. I may have relates to my personal company question that might not relate to most teams, but we have a constant flow of new game ideas. Some of them I get through literal dreams and visions. We have our flagship project we've been working on since 2003 that we have a skeleton team for, but some of our newer game projects are more relevant to current technology. Is it better to pitch a game that we've been working on longer, or that is more relevant to current trends or more revenue potential? I see an it depends coming up.
No, I'm trying. I'm really trying. One, you have to keep in mind, and I pointed this out to my son last night because he was playing the new Squad Busters from Supercell. And I said, do you realize that for every game Supercell puts out, they have actually greenlit 30, 40, 50 games? And he's like, what? And I said, yes. And I guarantee you 3 or 4 of those games made it to almost completion before they canceled it. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with having, a bunch of ideas for games and then trying to test it. Should you be pitching the one that you've worked on the longest? No, not necessarily. You need to be pitching the one that has the most chance of getting funded. That's the one that you've been pitching. And honestly, if you've been working on the same game for a very, very long time, it's possible that and I have no idea what the game is. You could be suffering from, what's it called?
Feature creep?
Well, yeah, that, but also the bias when you've been looking at the same thing for so long, you assume it's going to be the best one ever. That may not be your best game. You need to be pitching the one that has the highest chance of getting a publisher. And that comes down to realistically looking at the market, what's selling, what's not selling, and then doing a bit of voodoo and trying to figure out what's going to be selling 2 years from now. So the one that you've been working on for a long time may not be the best one to you be pitching. The one that you need to be pitching is the one that gets you funding. So the one that keeps you in business and makes it to market.
Yeah, I can see that. We've been suffering from restarting the game because the technology advances faster than we can. Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe the scope should be smaller. The scope should be smaller until you get a team that is actually able to do that at that stage, right? It's hard to, like a one-man team can't make an MMO. I mean, they could, but by the time it's done, there's a new game engine really.
And that's an issue. I mean, if you're not able to, get the game done in time to keep up with market, I mean, that's a pretty big issue. And so that's something that you've got to reevaluate too.
Right. Let's see here.
Confirmation bias. Good job. Good job, Ethan.
Bias.
That's what I was looking for. Yes.
Do y'all review and advise games on games at early stages of development, like quarterly check-ins?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Good.
Ping me offline and we can talk about it. But yeah, absolutely, we do that.
Easy peasy. What accomplishment sticks out to you the most when it comes to yourself and or your team?
This is an easy one. It's actually indie game business. It's like I've done a lot in this industry, and a lot that I'll never get credited for. We we worked on Kindle games back on the e-ink Kindles, not the, everything's a tablet now. But we actually did some flashcard games for preschool and kindergartners on that. So people could, when mom and dad weren't reading their Kindle, they could hand it to the kid. They could like learn phonics and letters and all this other stuff. And those programs were actually picked up by a group in Africa to help teach English to villages that were not in major metropolitan cities, because they could take a bunch of Kindles, take them into town, get on the Wi-Fi, load up all of these apps or games on the Kindle, and then take them back out to the village and use them as teaching materials, because there was no, obviously, Wi-Fi out there. That's very cool. Very proud of that. The thing that I am the most proud of is, though, indie game business. And I will never forget the first day that somebody asked a question on the server and someone else from the community answered it before I did. And I was like, oh my God, we actually made a community. We built something here that people are using and that it's helpful. So yeah, without a doubt, my thing that I am most proud of is actually the community and the stuff that we built around indie game business.
That's awesome. And then Ash came in and just like made it even more amazing.
Oh, I thought you were going to go in a completely different direction of that, because y'all were still on the who's the favorite kick. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Then Ash came in and
yeah.
okay. We got a few more questions. You got time? You still want to go?
Yeah. I have a meeting in an hour.
Okay. Thoughts on getting a publisher during early access for a game that has had modest success, but has lots of outstanding wish lists?
It comes down to whether or not you're actually selling the game. If you have given early access and you are selling the game, your probability of getting a deal is very, very, very low. If you have a Steam page and you're just taking wish lists, that's fine. But the minute you start actually selling the game, you dramatically hamstring your probability of getting a publisher, because early access has evolved to the point now where it's basically a launch, and publishers aren't going to touch anything that has already been launched, because they can't build the marketing behind it and control all the marketing stuff that goes with it. So unfortunately, if you have actually started selling your game, it's your outlook for getting a publisher is not good. That's where you should either be looking for an investor, and I think that's going to be tough too, or basically working with a marketing company and trying to do a marketing campaign on your own, building to your actual 1.0 launch.
Okay, here we go. Here's what Yuri just asked this. Might not be able to talk about this, but do you see Gen AI, for example, powered AI NPC dialogue systems, being hot for publishers, or do you think that the copyright issues would be blocking this?
Both. But I mean, so the copyright issue, for those that don't know, is the fact that you can't copyright something that was AI generated. It has to come from a real human. We talked about this a couple of shows ago with the monkey selfie.
The monkey, yeah.
Which I still love that court case. You can't copyright something, but in reality, if you're using AI to do the narrative within your game, I don't know how much copyright is going to be effective in that anyway, because it's like a book. You copyright the title and you may get a trademark on like the book art or a logo or something, but maybe no, I think that is anyway. That's a lawyer question. We've got one of our law reviews coming up on June 19th. Ask Andrew. I don't know. The AI part, I mean, we're already seeing it to a certain extent. In fact, I mean, there's a Skyrim mod that has an NPC that talks to you, and it's all generative AI, scripting is done with that. I know EA has already said they're using AI for a lot of stuff. So, I mean, is AI a part of game development? Yes, it's going to be. It's a matter of how people use it, really. I don't think the issue that's blocking it is as much the copyright or as much as it's not good yet. I mean, I've had developers for 15 years telling me that they built this fantastic structure that generates random quests that are believable in an RPG I've yet to see it in any of them. A lot of people have tried. But I haven't seen it actually work yet. Will it work eventually? Yeah, I'm sure it will. I mean, we wouldn't have thought AI was where it is now 5 years ago. But the copyright issue actually could be blocking some of it. I don't know. Ask Andrew. Ask one of the, go on our server and ask one of the lawyers that are there.
I love the concept of AI NPCs. I think that's awesome, especially when they start interacting with each other. Right?
That's the thing. That to me is like one of the best things about Skyrim, and you don't see it as much in Fallout 4 as you see it in Skyrim. Is you're just walking down the road and like some completely random shit just broke out. You know, a dragon accidentally breathed fire onto a village, and now all the people are attacking, and the cows are involved. And that's the kind of shit that I see happening with AI and narrative. I just would love to walk into, you know, one of these towns and just see a bunch of people arguing, a bunch of NPCs arguing over random inane shit, because that's what the AI, you know, picked up on. But yeah.
And AI, here's a question right here. Is the general opinion on AI tools like animation rigging frowned upon as much as 2D and 3D art? Big studios are using 2D and 3D, like for gun skins or for multiple, you know, who knows what, many things already.
The reality is when you start getting into things like the animation, the rigging, and the core parts, I don't know. Because I'm not as familiar with how those things work. To me, it's all wizardry in the first place. If now somebody's using a computer to do that wizardry, I have no idea. That's part of that industry, part of the industry that I've never really, I don't understand. I don't know how it's done in the first place.
Right. Yeah, rigging would be awesome if it was just AI done. I mean, even riggers don't like to rig characters. I mean, I don't know. I rigged for a while and I did not enjoy it at all. I was like, I am not putting this on my resume.
This is not fun.
This sucks. Not putting it on my resume. Okay. What has been one of the biggest struggles over the last 20 years?
For me, and I think there's a lot of developers who've been doing this a long time that will agree, it's just having the perseverance to keep doing this. And I've said on this podcast many times, there's been 2, maybe 3 times that I literally tried to get out of the industry when I was just like, I'm done with this. It's too insecure, and we can all make more money doing something else in another world. And then I go for like one job interview and they're like, okay, well, you'll wear a suit and you'll go do this. And I'm like, oh man, fuck this. I'm going back to games. It's literally, you know, finding the joy and staying in it again. And I do that. It's a lot easier now that we have Indie Game Business, because I get to talk to folks every single week and find out, you know, not only from our guests, but from the community, you know, what's interesting them, what's driving them, what's doing all this other stuff. Before that, it was going to conferences, because I would, every time I got like into a rut, it's like, oh my God, this job sucks. This industry sucks. Why am I doing this? And then I go to, you know, a conference and I meet a developer who's like fresh into the industry, or they're an experienced vet that is onto something new. And you just see that passion again, and you're like, oh yeah, this is why I do it. I was at GammaCon in Mexico a couple of years ago, and I had finished up what I was doing work-wise there, and I was just going around looking, you know, talking to vendors and things like that. And there was a kid. They had an old CRT monitor set up with a bunch of the old original Nintendo games, and so, you know, he's trying to play Duck Hunt. And he's got the gun like pushed right up against the screen. And I looked at him, I said, you speak English? And he's like, yeah. I said, back up like 3 feet. It'd be a whole lot easier. But to see, you know, these kids come in and they get excited. That's part of the reason why I love Gamescom. It's like, I don't go in the public area outside of that day that the business people get in there before the, you know, consumers do. But if you're at Gamescom on a Thursday or a Friday, just go down to that set of stairs, because the consumer area is here and the business area is up here, and there's a set of stairs that goes down. And if you go to the top of those stairs and you look down into that mass of people, and they're all dressed up and they're all excited, that's one of those things that it's like, okay, yeah, this is why we do this. This is why we put up with all the other shit. that goes on in this industry is because we're at the end of the day creating something that makes this many people happy. So yeah.
So that was goes to the next question right here from Margarita. Why games and not other industries? Wow, that was weird how that came in there.
Because I love this. I love games. I'm one of the weird executives in this industry who plays a lot of games. I had Andrew Pappas had me on his podcast. I don't think it's actually gone out yet, but had an interview with him, and he's like, "Okay, so what do you play?" And I rattled off like 8 games that I'm currently playing, and he's like, "Okay, I think that was more than anyone's ever listed before." I do it because I love this. And it's like, yes, it's still work. That whole thing about, if you do what you love, you never go to work a day in your life. Well, that's shit. It's still work, but it's work that you enjoy and you don't mind going to, and you have a good time. And I get to hang out with people, that are like me. And so why games versus anything else? Because everything else is boring. This is fun until it's not. And then it's fun again.
It's until it's not. Okay, here we go. Let's go hit through the rest of Margarita's questions. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can go, another 20, 25 minutes. Are people
Okay.
still watching? Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. How's the process of testing and choosing games for publishers and investor?
Okay. So everybody's going to have their own different little process, but in general, this is what it looks like. And this is why you need to pay attention to all the things that we pay attention to. And again, I'm cheating because I got Margarita's questions ahead of everybody else. One of the first things that a scout is going to see is social media or a trailer or a video. And so that's going to be first. And you need to be really engaging in like that first 10 seconds. So they're going to look at it and go, okay, whatever, another Metroidvania, and they're going to go to the next one. So typically, they're going to review the trailer. They're going to get interested. They're going to find a pitch deck, reach out to you, whatever. Then they're going to look at the pitch deck. If they like the pitch deck, they're going to talk to you, call you and say, okay, this is what we like, what we don't like, get us a build. And then they'll be looking at a build. Sometimes that order gets screwed up, but in the stuff that we see come through, and part of our submission process has all that stuff in there. So we get it all at once, basically. But you've got these little segments that are going to catch people's attention, and you have to engage them on one of them in order to go to the next one. But a lot of the time, that's going to be something visual they've seen online. Then it's going to go to a pitch deck, or at least like researching, who you are, what you've done, what's more about this game, roughly what's it going to cost, that sort of stuff. Then they're going to reach out to you and, ask you more questions, and then they're going to play the demo. And that's in a nutshell how it happens. The reality, though, is sometimes that takes 2 weeks. It's like our green light process just here. And remember, we're not even a publisher. It takes roughly 2 weeks to get through to that stage of us actually reviewing your stuff. There are publishers that 7 months, in between.
Wow.
Yeah. So we tell people, plan on it being a 4-month process, between the day that you send that publisher everything that they need to make a decision, not when you first reach out to them, the day that you've sent them everything that they need to the day that you sign a contract, on average 4 months. Has it happened in less? Yes, I've seen it happen in 3 weeks. There are publishers where it takes 7 or 8 months, but on average 4 months.
Okay, here we go. Here's a question from Discord from Eli. How to get a mentorship for my game? Would love to have a mentor to help me make it better.
Mentorship programs are all across the board. It's actually one of my pillars down the road is to build a solid mentorship program through IndieGameBusiness. So we need sponsors to do that. So if anyone's out there listening and want to, get your company behind building a better tomorrow for games, reach out to me or to Charlie and let's, make that happen. There are multiple mentorship programs. I'm involved in a couple of them. The IGDA has one. I've just talked to one out on the West Coast of the US, recently. I have worked with government, organizations, in countries around the world that try to bring in experts and mentor teams. There's not a single like comprehensive place to go to. That's part of the problem. Another one is a lot of the places with the better programs don't have the capacity, because they're probably nonprofits as well, to actively manage it. It's like one of my frustrations as a mentor is when I have mentees out there who, we do one phone call and I answer questions and I'm like, okay, set up another call. Let's keep doing this. And then I never hear from them again. And I'm sorry, when I'm volunteering my time and I'm mentoring, it's not my job to chase you down to make you listen to me. It has to be a self-motivating factor. But there's not a ton of, ones that I've seen that have a good comprehensive process for managing that relationship. Unfortunately, you're going to have to find a lot of it on your own. The IGDAs is one of the better ones because they actually use some website that I can't remember what the name of it is, that'll actually prompt you and say, hey, listen, have you talked to your mentor lately? But you're going to have to probably do a lot of looking around. I mean, as a starting step, ask questions on the Discord server. Maybe there's folks there that you can find, sessions like this. I mean, I'm always happy if you ping me on a question on the Discord server. If I don't answer it immediately, I will answer it, as soon as I see it or when I have a time or whatever. But it's on my wish list of things to do at IGB.
I think that would be awesome. I think that'd be super
I think it
awesome.
would
So
too.
anybody wants to throw money at that. Also, I think if anybody wants to throw money at a Shark Tape type thing where somebody could get a publishing deal, I think that would be awesome.
There's so many complexities that go into that, though.
Yeah.
I don't know that we'll ever see it, truthfully, because it's not as easy. It's not as easy to go in and do what they do. And I know what you see on Shark Tank isn't like the whole process at all. But I've seen people, I've had people come in and do this thing. The closest I can see is like the pitch sessions that we do, like Exola does them. A lot of the trade organizations do them. That's about the closest I see to it. But that's a really hard thing to do in our industry.
Maybe someone could offer up a monetary prize or something. You know what I
Well,
mean?
yeah, that would be
$4 million. Okay, here we go. Let's see. I'm going to leave that one question for last. What do I need to do to be picked up by a publisher? How early in production should I start pitching?
So pitching starts before pitching starts. The minute you have something to show, be it a GIF, a screenshot, video, whatever, you need to start building a community on social media and on Discord. And then the minute you have something playable that is coherent, I'm not saying, like your first playable that's just like a gray box running around, whatever. The minute you have something that's playable, you should start at least reaching out to publishers. An ideal demo for a publisher is going to highlight all of the unique selling points and the feature points that are in your pitch deck, and be playable, honestly, not be a buggy mess. But yeah, you should start building a community the minute you have something to show, because that's going to help you get a publisher. And then you should start pitching to publishers the minute you have, a coherent demo.
That's good. Okay, let's see. I'm just fielding other questions in here. There it goes. What does it feel like?
That was what we did earlier, wasn't it? It feels like banging your head against the wall a lot of times.
Test and try games so early in development.
There is a fun aspect of it because you do get to see stuff before it comes out, and you do get to see some pretty unique stuff. But at the same time, get it out of your head that you're playing the completed games, because you're not. You're playing, early stage, buggy message, placeholder art, that sort of stuff. Right. It's fun, but it's not fun.
It does go along the lines of that. But you know what? Roblox games aren't fun, and lots of people enjoy those.
Don't get me fucking started on Roblox. It's just I watch my son play these games, and I'm like,
Why is that fun? I know.
It's
Is
a
he-
community aspect of it too. He's hanging out with his friends.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're not going to catch me playing a Roblox game.
I've tried them. I've
I
tried
don't have this monster PC for gaming that I can run around with a fucking 8 poly character playing soccer.
I've tried like the tycoon ones. And then there's one you just do it, and then once you do everything,
idle games.
Once you do everything, yeah, you run here, you touch this, you go run and stand on that, you go run and stand on that, and then once you do everything, there was one. It's like you're just done. That's it. You've won the game, and then you just mess around.
This is why I see an absolute opportunity for these studios that are popping up that are like, we're only making Roblox games or we're only making Fortnite games, because so many of those games suck. There is such growth potential. It's like they're getting however many. I just saw somebody like Adidas or something just posted on LinkedIn that they had sold 2 million Robux full of gold necklaces with a shoe on it or some shit. It's like, yes, it is frustrating that you see people dropping all this time and talent into, bigger games that look better, that play better. And then, these little shit games are getting so many millions of plays, but there's an opportunity there when people start coming in and making good games on those platforms. Anyway, that's the end of my Roblox rant.
Okay. Hi, Clam from Discord. Do you have a recommendation for how to distribute a demo?
I actually recommend Itch. You run into, problems, and when you start distributing demos and even selling demos like on Steam or other stores, I have never, to this day, seen a publisher turn down a game because it had a good following on Itch.io. That's one of the best ways that I see to get it out there and get feedback. And then when you reach out to the publisher, you can just say, here's my pitch deck and here's a link to play it on the Itch. There've been several really good games that have been commercial success on bigger platforms that started out as Itch.io games. That's my recommendation.
Yeah. And so everybody, you got some questions, drop them in there. We've got 3 questions left. So if you've got some questions, we want to hear it. I'm saving a special one for last.
We seriously got this whole list?
Yeah, we seriously went through the whole list. And then all the ones that I pulled from Discord. Actually, let me look over in the business section and see.
Let me answer one while you're looking.
Yeah, there is more. There's more in the Discord. I just seen just right now. I'm going to put them into my document. So
whatever I don't get answered into this marathon session that we've had, I've got a meeting at after this, and then sometime this afternoon, I'll sit down and I'll try to get through them.
All right. So here we go. Hey, Jay, how much time do you think makes sense for continued development and waiting for publishers and other funding processes before you stop and consider your project not viable?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it is.
That's hard, because at one level, you always want to think that there's a chance. And I have seen, and I don't want to put too much false hope on anybody, I have seen games get shopped at one stage and then, not picked up. And then something happens in the industry or some other game takes off and all of a sudden it creates an opportunity for that developer to, repitch, and they get a deal. A lot of it comes down to why you're not landing a deal. Is it because the game is not fun? Is it because it's one of these genres that publishers don't want to touch? And that would be puzzle, Metroidvania, visual novel, platformers. Those are, I'm not saying they're not going to touch them, but those are the 4 hardest ones to actually, get a publisher for. It comes down to, again, I'm not saying it depends. I think I've gone this entire time, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you haven't said it.
I haven't answered a question with it depends. It comes down to why you're not getting that deal. And unless you get real honest feedback from a lot of publishers, you're not going to understand it. My general reaction is, if that demo is as good as you're going to be able to make it with your current funding and ability, and you have already pitched it to all the publishers who are a viable target for that product, and you do not have a deal, that's probably when you just need to cut it and go to something else. That's not to say that something might happen down the road and that particular genre come back around, or, you know, a different opportunity open up and it be there. But if you can't make the demo realistically better than it already is, and you've pitched it to all your viable targets, it's time to look at something different. Keep in mind these examples that I'm talking about, things like real-time strategy games, space combat games, things that the publishing community said was dead, and now they're coming back perfectly viable again. We were in Madrid last year or 2 years ago and doing a pitch session, and one of the developers had a vehicular combat game. And one of the publishers said, you know, how are we going to get it? There's no sales data to support that somebody's going to buy this. And I was like, whoa. Let me answer that real quick. That's because publishers won't publish them. You can't tell me there's no market for something that you won't test the market for. That's when somebody does a vehicular combat game, and I swear it might be Fortnite, because I don't know if you played the latest Fortnite season, but it's much more vehicles and much more combat. And it's, honest to God, the most fun I've had in that game in like 6 months, because it's twisted metal again. I want somebody, here's my plea. Somebody has a good vehicular combat game. Let's start pitching that to publishers and go, look how much Fortnite's doing it. If Fortnite's doing it, must be something right.
Love Twisted Metal. The first
God,
one.
I did too. But be on the lookout for things like that in the market that can change and bring a genre back to life. But the reality is, if you can't make that game substantially better than what it is now due to funding, ability, team, whatever, and you've already pitched it to all your viable publishers, it's time to move to something different.
Because like car vehicle games were hot, and then they petered out.
Yeah, because publishers stopped publishing them.
Yeah.
And then the publishers
Like
turn
Road
around
Rash.
and go, well, there's no sales record to support this genre. Well, no shit. You won't publish them. Sorry.
Road Rash. I love that. And then I played it again later, and I'm like, this is not so fun. But, you know, what's cooler than riding a motorcycle and listening to Soundgarden, you know? Okay, here we go. For us overthinkers, can you give us a list of this is what you need to have put together clearly and in how much detail it needs to be completed for submitting a game concept to you for consideration?
I'm not going to tell you it's best if it's already finished the game, because that's not true. Publishers don't want an already finished game, because there's still going to be tweaks and things that need to be done, you know, to make it market viable. Even if you feel like you've finished it, you need to, like I said earlier, you need to identify what those unique selling points and the feature pillars in your game are, and your demo needs to show them off. Doesn't have to show off everything, but if you tell me that this is the most innovative platformer that I've ever played, and you can't show me in the first 5 minutes of that demo that that's true, we're done. So you don't need to have a whole game finished. You just need to be able to show in that demo that it's fun, and that you can show me how you're actually going to bring to life all of these unique selling points and features that you have. And if you don't have something that's not an iteration or not an improvement or not something new in the genre, then you're not ready.
It's that 20% rule, right? 20% innovation.
80% what you know, 20% something different.
Yeah. So here's that goes right along those lines. I'm finishing the prototype of my game. This is from Yuri on YouTube. And I'm already with the steps to the vertical slice in terms of visuals and mechanics and the scale from 0 to 10. How much do publishers expect from it?
Every publisher is different. And to make it even worse than that, every scout or, you know, reviewer and every publisher is going to be different. You got to be further than a gray box. If I'm going to put an average on it, you need to be at a 4. But you need to be able to show concept art or stills or something that shows me what it's going to look like at the end. But you don't necessarily need completely 100% polished graphics, but you do need it to not look like shit. Because the people that are like, publishers don't care what it looks like, that's not true. They do. Especially now, given how competitive, you know, everything is with all the developers and all the games being pitched. It needs to look good. It doesn't need to be perfect.
All right, let's shift gears. How do you feel about bots in multiplayer games? Some say it boosts longevity. Others say if players notice, they hate it. I'm like, look at Fortnite, right? I am happy
If
to get
players
the
notice
kills
you
of the
didn't do
boss.
it right.
I- I'm happy to get the bot kills.
Hell
right?
yes, I
You know what I
win.
mean?
You know, I think bots are absolutely necessary in multiplayer because what you're doing is preventing that scenario where you launch into multiplayer and nobody's playing it, and then they stop playing it. When the next batch of people come in, there's nobody playing it. You don't need to label them as bots, but I think you absolutely do need bots to make your game, and they need to be somewhat believable. But in order to avoid that step of, okay, I bought this game or I'm trying this game, nobody else is playing it, and then you go away, and then the next person comes in and goes, oh, well, nobody's playing it. You have to have them in there.
And Fortnite has so many bots, and you know who the bots are because when you go into the lobby and you go and you slide up against them and knock them off the map, they will boom, spawn again and then run exactly to the spot where they were and start doing their.
I didn't know that. Yeah. I just figure it's always the ones that are pickaxing a door when I'm shooting at them. So,
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I got about 5 more minutes.
All right. Well, we got 3 more questions.
All right. We'll do these 3 and then that's it. Mm-hmm.
Can you share how you have balanced work and family life or any kind of advice in that area?
How I have managed it has not been well for the majority of my career. Well, I will say the majority. Part of the reason that I left that company that I was at, 10 years ago, or not 10 years ago, after 10 years, was because it was like seriously affecting my health. The owners had gone out and tried to get funding, and they did secure funding, but at the same time, they had dumped all of their work on me. And so I was doing my work and their work, and I was throwing up blood from ulcers at 4 a.m. And when that day came that I quit, aside from my wife coming home from work and going, why are you home? And I'm like, well, I quit my 6-figure job today. I regretted not doing it earlier. It's somewhat easier to manage work-life balance when you have a home office and you're doing it remotely. But at the same time, you actually run this risk of, because your office is always just right there, especially if you're in one confined place. Sorry, Elsa's, wanting to be heard. But in our old house, my office was right off the living room. And so it was very easy for me to okay, nothing's on TV, I'm going to go work. Now my office I literally have to go outside my house to get down to what used to be the garage in this house and work. And so I've got a separation there. It wasn't, my work-life balance wasn't always that great. And it literally caused me physical stress and pain. And I don't recommend it to anyone. You have to take time for yourself. You have to take time for your family, but you can't, all these people on LinkedIn, it's like, oh, you got to work 7 days a week and 54 hours a day and all this other fuck those people. They're not realistic. And if they are, they're going to be miserable human beings that nobody likes. And
their family life will suffer.
Yes. Or most likely they don't have one. And so it's one of those that you have to have that in there. Otherwise, and a lot of people, if you're younger, I'm sorry, you're not going to recognize it till you're older. And, there's people on my team and other people in the industry I know who have walked away from, bigger jobs, sometimes much bigger jobs, even than the one I had, and everyone's like, well, how do you walk away from that much money? It's because at a certain point, it's not worth it anymore.
Not worth it.
And it's hard to explain that to somebody who's never been through it, but you'll learn it as you get older. So it's best to give that thought and put that into practice now. Like, we don't have vacation days. We don't have set vacation days here at the Powell Group. I don't say, okay, you get 2 weeks vacation. I don't care how much vacation. As long as the work's getting done, I don't care how much vacation you take. Just let me know when you're doing it so I can plan around it. But that in and of itself is a problem, because sometimes then you get people who won't take vacation. And so I have to sit down every now and then and go, okay, basically, who has not been on vacation? You need to get the fuck out. You go somewhere, do a staycation. I don't care. You need to decompress and stop working for a little bit.
Yes. So who's the favorite?
This morning, Charlie is.
Charlie's a favorite? Oh, great. Is Ash commenting? Oh no, she's not commenting.
Uh,
All right. So we got one more after this. Dinomaniac. Is there any specific constant you have noticed throughout all the top successful indie studios in the development of their games? It's a good question.
That was a very good question. Probably one Heather's better positioned to answer than me. But I would say an understanding, I mean, one, perseverance, two, a level. Don't bankrupt yourself. Don't take out second mortgages on your house just to get your game developed, that sort of stuff. But, the studios that learn from their mistakes and that pay attention to the market and put stuff out there and then support it, those are the stories that I see are the most successful. Because a lot of these games, I don't care what you say, Stardew Valley was not developed by one person. Yes, Eric Barone did a lot of the early work, but the minute he started getting to the launching stage, there were other people involved. Manor Lords, that gets posted as a solo development thing, but even the developer goes, I'm not a solo dev. There's a lot of different aspects of this. You have to be willing to bring in help and understanding what you're going to need and go get that help and support. And, if that's hiring somebody or if that's working with a publisher, whatever it may be. But the studios who understand the market, who adapt their game to what's, going to be successful in that market, and that stick around and persevere with it and, put out updates and extend the life of their game, they're the ones that are the most successful.
That's good. That's good. All right, here we go. Here's the final, the panache, the cherry on top. What is the one piece of advice everyone in the industry needs to know?
You have to have thick skin to do this. You do need to. This is that work-life balance thing. You do have to take time and go out on. Take time that's out of the industry. Just this week, I turned down a trip and a speaking engagement at a conference because the conference is Father's Day weekend, and it was a trip to Europe too. It was to a city I really like, but it's Father's Day weekend, and there's a Comic-Con that's down in Charlotte every Father's Day, and my son and I go. That's our Father's Day thing. We go down to Charlotte. We go to the Comic-Con. Cool. And I turned down that opportunity to go to that conference because it's Father's Day weekend. The one rule that my wife has always had for me, especially since I started doing this, I started traveling more and more and more. She's like, I don't care how often you're gone. And keep in mind, we've been married 20 years. So this is not like some new marriage. We're used to each other's shit at this point. But the one rule that exists is I have to be home for my son's birthday. I'm perfectly fine with that. I have no issues with that rule. But you have to be able to balance everything, and you have to decide whether you really like this industry, because it is brutal. It sucks. It will absolutely rip your soul out and drain your bank account. But if you don't love it, then don't do it. You can absolutely have much better salary and much better work-life balance in some other industry with the skill set that you have in this industry. But yeah, that's my very hard-learned device. I mean,
the game industry is not the highest paid industry for like programmers and for
no. Go
artists.
Get a job at a bank. They'll pay you a shit ton more.
Yes. Oh man, this has been awesome. This has been awesome. Thank you for being a guest on here. In another 5 years, we'll let you come back.
Awesome. I look forward to that.
It looks like we don't have podcasts for 2 weeks. So
maybe, I don't know. I just work here.
Yeah, that's what it looks like on my schedule. It looks like they're just totally deleted out. So
could be.
Yeah, that could possibly be it. Thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate you so much. We appreciate you that have been around since the beginning. We appreciate you if you just showed up the first time. We appreciate you if you just realized right now that I'm also on the Indie Game Business as well as Jay. I just got an email says, I didn't know you was on Indie Game Business. Yes.
Really?
Yeah. I guess I should be on there more.
Obviously, you're not watching the very beginning and the very end of every show.
I guess maybe I should be on there more. I guess
you could. We'll interview you. Maybe that's what we'll do.
That's it. I'm going to talk about that life work balance too. Oh man. Yeah. Join our Discord, discord.gg/IndieGameBusiness. IndieGameBusiness.com. That's where all the information is. This is going to soon be a podcast that you can listen to pretty soon on Spotify. We have that too. If you just want to, sure, you can tune in on YouTube or watch it on Facebook, but later on, if you want to listen to it on Spotify or one of your other favorite podcasting platforms, we have pretty much all of our stuff on there.
It's all good.
It's all on there. So thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.